So we come to COP after the summer of 2021 if we didn't need any more sort of stark reminders of some of the physical impacts of climate change. We've had it in abundance. We've had the floods in Germany that took over 200 lives and are estimated to cost anywhere between £4 to £5 billion in impact. We had record temperatures in British Columbia of 49.6 degrees, which is insane when you consider this is like British Columbia in Canada, and the wildfires in Greece. So, you know, it really did, I think, leave no doubt for the policymakers, those who are in those negotiations over in the blue zone there in COP, as to the challenge ahead of them. So reflecting on kind of what has happened this week, I think compared to the 2015 pledges that we got at Paris, we are much closer to some of our ambitions, where it's estimated to be somewhere in the region of about 1.8 to 1.9 through the commitments that have been made. We've got commitments around methane, deforestation. We have India's commitment, not least to the 2070 for net zero, but also its renewables rollout, which I think is really important. But the IPCC AR6 report made it really clear we need rapid decarbonisation of our economy, and we need to make significant inroads to that. Otherwise, the frequency and severity of the physical risks that we are likely to be facing are going to be profound. I think it's universally acknowledged, I think, that the standout speech by a leader this week has been by Mia Mottley, the Barbados Prime Minister, who basically re-emphasised the fact that anything less than 1.5 degrees was a death sentence, not only to her community, but the Maldives, Fiji, Kenya, and many other island nations. What really also stood out was the fact that this comparative, I've used this German floods in many of my presentations around the lives lost and that sort of impact on sort of financial impact, but that equates from a German GDP of about 0.1%. Whereas when you compare that to some of the impacts of some of these physical impacts on some of these island communities, it's hundreds of % impact, negative impact on their GDP. So we really need to be aware of the real severity of the impact on these very vulnerable nations. So she left COP, she left those leaders in that room with an absolutely unambiguous message that they must try harder. Many pension funds say, but what about my fiduciary duty? What I would say to you is there is no fiduciary duty if you have no functioning economy or society. So, you know, hopefully that will kind of resolve that sort of bugbear of an issue about whether this is actually material to your day-to-day operations and how you integrate this into your pension funds. Certainly the regulators have recognised that, and you're seeing that embedded now in the requirements to do the Task Force for Climate-Related Disclosure. We had the UK's announcement around the first net zero aligned financial centre and the requirement to have mandatory transition plans. The building of a double materiality into how we think about things, not only the impact these things will have on my portfolio, but what impact will the portfolio companies have on the real world and on that bigger picture. And stewardship and engagement with the companies in which we invest is absolutely at the heart of all of this. But you're not alone. We've already seen commitments of over 50 asset owners to the Paris-aligned investor initiative, which was started by the Institutional Investor Group on Climate Change, and they're joined by over 220 asset managers, which in combination, those asset managers represent over 50% of assets under management, and with those asset owners, over 60 trillion of assets that are making that commitment to move to net zero. They're part of that GFANZ commitment, that announcement that Mark Carney made, that's part of that race to net zero. So that's like kind of the problem and perhaps the pressure that's being brought on pension funds by the regulators. So what are some of the solutions? Well, the Institutional Investor Group on Climate Change has been working through its Paris-aligned investor initiative with a whole group of asset owners and asset managers to pull together something called the Net Zero Investor Framework, and that really provides a practical toolkit on the actions needed to take. It has essentially two key elements. There's the commitment to decarbonise, particularly focusing on things like the 50% emissions intensity reduction we need to make by 2030, but making near-term targets leading up to that. And that emissions reduction being real world, not just some fancy kind of, well, I'll just sell out of some of these or more high impact and sort of buy to the stuff that we can't really see the impacts for, but it's actually affecting like the real world economy, which is why stewardship is very much at the heart of that toolkit. But it's not just about the negative. We know that there's about, the estimates from the London School of Economics put some of the risks around 2.5 trillion pounds of risks around climate change, but there's also a massive opportunity set. And we actually saw announced last week that a coalition of UK and Nordic investors commit to 130 billion over the next 10 years in climate solutions, whether that be renewables, nature-based solutions, energy efficiency, and investments into adaptation, all of those really critical parts of the solution. We also recognise that pension funds do not operate in a vacuum. The Institutional Investor Group is part of a wider investor agenda who sent the 2021 Global Investor Statement on the Climate Crisis to policymakers, asking them to step up on their ambitions to phase out fossil fuel subsidies and to phase out coal, and to really build climate change into their day-to-day decision making, as we heard from the Minister and what they're doing in Scotland, but to really bring that to the fore and to make that real. So we heard that Jeffy talked about their path to COP, but it's also the path from COP that's going to be absolutely vital, and maintaining that momentum that we need in order to actually bring this to be a reality and to bring it into action. Yes, we need the policymakers to actually step up, not only increase their ambitions, but deliver on what they've promised. Yes, we need those financial leaders to deliver on the promises they've made. Yes, we don't actually have all the answers to all the questions in achieving net zero, but we do have many of the tools that we need to make progress. We have many of the tools to take action, and there are no excuses for net zero. Thank you.